Mayor Bill de Blasio going to bat for his wife, Chirlane McCray, that after she told all about her career and family life in a New York Magazine spread. And Eric Schultz talked specifically about her struggle with being a new mom 20 years ago. Well, the media, they honed in on just that. Editorial said McCray had always imagined a life with children, but as with so many women, the reality of motherhood, the loss of independence, the relentlessness of the responsibility was difficult. She told the magazine, "I was 40 years old. I had a life, especially with Chiara. Well, it made me feel some guilt." Well, of course, yes, I did. But the truth is, I cannot spend every day with her. I didn't want to do that. I looked for all kinds of reasons not to do it. I love her. It took a long time for me to get into a more taking care of kids and what that means. And Daily News followed the editorial with its own piece saying, in a candid new interview, First Lady McCray admits that she initially struggled adjusting to a role as mother and still feels guilt about needing time apart from newborn Chiara. The Post also followed suit and said, in a startlingly frank confession, Mayor de Blasio's wife says she was unable to embrace motherhood and initially neglected Chiara. Now, de Blasio, the mayor that is, says the tabloids took the editorial and put an unfair spin on it, and he wants, in fact demands, an apology.
I think both the Post and the Daily News owe Chirlane an apology. I think they owe all of us an apology for absolutely misrepresenting what she said and for caricaturing, a reality that I think so many women face.
Daily News says, don't hold your breath. Today's piece and its editor, who is a new mother herself, fired back in a piece saying, Chirlane, you're probably a good mother, maybe even a great one. But that doesn't mean you get to fret about your performance, then complain at how people discuss it. And if you want an apology, be woman enough to ask for it yourself instead of sending your husband out there to demand one for you. All right, let's bring in Dominic Carter, of course, political journalist and author, and Andrew Whitman, as I said, senior political correspondent. Was it a cheap shot, Dominic, what the Post and the News did, or do the de Blasios want it both ways? They want the family embraced and help them get elected, you could argue, the Afro of Dante and the family story of an interesting family. Which one is it?
I have a question for you guys. Who in the hell is advising the mayor and the first lady? Yeah. This is the worst case example of how to handle a message. What does this have to do with running the city of New York?
But even if it doesn't have something to do with it, to your point, Dominic, how does it advance their message?
It gets in the way. It says that you're not ready for prime time. It was the first lady of New York City that agreed to sit down with New York Magazine. She talked about it. She told the truth. It's a reality, as we heard last night from Jeannie Zaino, Dr. Jeannie, that Jeannie Zaino, that many women go through. It's not an easy experience. But the first lady, did you see Donna Hanover sitting before cameras doing these types of interviews? Or David Dinkins' wife? Or perhaps Bloomberg's first wife, who he's now divorced from? There's no reason to talk about this. She could have been, a reporter could have pushed her from New York Magazine to discuss this, but the Post and the News, they're doing what the Post and the News do. That's why they call tabloids.
I don't have a problem with the First Lady saying what she said. I think it's an interesting issue that a lot of women go through, and if she wants to be a spokeswoman for that, more power to her. I thought everything else that followed that was just out of line and stupid as far as I was concerned. The Post, with putting her on the front page saying I was a bad mom, shame on you. Yes, that's what the tabloids do, but still, they get egg on their face all the time, and this is another case of that.
Wait. But what did the Post do that was wrong?
They're blowing it out of proportion. They're taking
How
it out of
context.
And they're taking it out of context. She didn't say I was a bad mom. We read the quote of what she actually said.
She basically said she didn't want to be around her daughter.
And a lot of parents go through that.
And she looked for every opportunity to get away from her.
And a lot of
that makes you a bad mom.
A lot of parents go through that. It doesn't make you a bad mom. It makes you a parent who's going through a little reticence after the fact.
I think they accurately quoted her.
But I don't think either one of us is prepared to judge who's a bad mom and who's not a bad mom.
Good point.
I think the de Blasio family was wrong. I think Mayor de Blasio was wrong to then. Who goes and demands an apology when you know from a newspaper? You never pick a fight with somebody who buys ink by the barrel. Is that
right? But
we agree on that one.
The part was, how did Bill de Blasio break through the pack in the primary? in a primary that none of us thought he was going to win.
He wouldn't have won if he didn't have a half African American son with an afro.
The
Period.
ad of his
That's what
kid,
happened.
Dante, walking down the street with his dad,
Yeah.
with the afro, narrating why his dad should be mayor, clearly had, if not a small role, a significant one in helping him break out of the pack. Mayor also chose to talk about his daughter's struggles with substance abuse and her recovery. And again, in both cases, the media gave it a very gauze treatment. They didn't dig in too much and whatever else.
But
they
Richard,
celebrated
he
recovery.
didn't choose to do it. He knew the media was about to drop
He
the
still
story.
got in front of it, okay? So now, no one dug this up. She volunteered this herself to then turn around and say shock at the coverage of the media and how dare they. She gave it to him. What did they think the Post was going to do with it?
Every political family tries to have it both ways when it comes to their family and
How
using them.
many would actually go in front of a camera and demand an apology?
But it's everywhere. Every family. Look, I was at the Republican State Convention last week. Rob Astorino said one of the reasons I'm qualified to be governor is because I'm a father and I view these things like a father. Andrew Cuomo says the same thing. Chris Christie says the same thing. Sarah Palin held up her kids as an example of why I've got expertise on some of these issues.
And what happened to her?
But then said, how dare the media focus on my family? It happens all the time with successful politicians and unsuccessful politicians.
But with this family, media-wise, message-wise, it's clearly a lack of discipline.
And the other part is, Dominic, you do that to get elected. But once you get elected,
Right.
what's the point?
And here's what I ask you. Why did the First Lady sit down with New York Magazine? You gotta know they're
Well,
looking
the
for a
funny
hook
part
for
is,
their
if you
story.
actually have read the piece now, maybe I'm one of the few, I read the piece, the vast majority did not deal with the struggles of her in the immediate aftermath and postpartum depression, whatever you want to call it. It had to do with her role as First Lady of New York City, a different role that many of her predecessors, if any, have ever assumed. It talked about her own background in politics and how she was really seen as a quiet force, but always behind the scenes. So that was a lot of it. But she is deft enough and has been involved in this game long enough to know that if you get a question you don't want to answer, or you get a question that the answer to it is going to be the headline no matter what, you don't answer the question, or you answer it with a non-answer. For her to volunteer that and then be shocked at the headline, I don't know. Okay. Tomorrow, we are going to be at the convention, the first of 2 days that the Democrats will anoint. As we all know, there's no surprises here, Andrew, who's going to be the nominees for all the statewide office. But there's two things that are interesting to me about it. Both, I guess we can start with the tone there, because not all Democrats actually love this governor, but not all Democrats are exactly wanting to take him on in public.
Well, as you mentioned, Rich, there isn't a lot of suspense behind the Democratic convention that starts tomorrow, but there are three basic storylines that we're trying to follow in all of this. Tomorrow we'll have the nomination of Comptroller Tom DiNapoli and Attorney General Eric Schneiderman. I'm curious to see what they have to say about Andrew Cuomo. They are not exactly beloved in the Cuomo inner circle. They have had public feuds back and forth, so it'll be interesting to see what they say and the measure of their relationship with Andrew Cuomo. As for the governor himself, he's got to pick a lieutenant governor. Bob Duffy's not running again. It'll be interesting to see who Cuomo picks as his number two and the reasoning behind that pick. Does he go for somebody upstate? Does he go for somebody of color or ethnicity? Or is it to try to appease the liberal progressive base? As we've talked about many times on this program, a lot of progressives in this state are not happy with Andrew Cuomo. They think he's progressive on social issues. And our friend Richard Brodsky, who nobody is to the left of Richard Brodsky on most issues, calls him a Tea Party Republican when it comes to fiscal issues. Right. So does Cuomo pick a very liberal number two because of that? Is there any upstart from some of the liberals who are in the room? That's the focus, or at least one of the things that we'll be watching for at the convention over the next couple of days. And of course, we'll have that for you starting at 9 a.m. tomorrow on FiOS 1 News Long Island and 6 p.m. here on RFL.
Do you think Andrew is right here in that there definitely no love lost between the comptroller or the attorney general and the governor? We talked about this yesterday. You have a fundraiser for Cuomo is raising money for Cahill. Now, that might be a small little thing, but does anybody, it's always said it's better to be feared than loved, right? Are they afraid of him, or do you think any of them are going to say, listen, he's kept me muzzled here, meaning the Attorney General, right? For the last 4 years. I'm not going through this anymore.
You know, Richard, I think Andrew Cuomo invented that slogan, that phrase, it's better to be feared than to be loved, because that is exactly the type of elected official he is. As far as DiNapoli and Snyderman, the controller and Attorney General, it's going to be one big wet kiss tomorrow to the governor. No one has the nerve to stand up to the sitting governor. If you did, you do it at your own peril, because he has a long memory and he will remember it forever. So it'll be one big united party.
I'm going to ask.
Yes, and good luck to you. And as Andrew said, we will have continuing coverage this week from the state Democratic Convention out on the island. That again tomorrow and Thursday. Okay, coming up next. Another one of Governor Christie's former aides takes the stand in the Bridgegate probe, and just like the others, he says his hands are clean.